I seem to have settled into this lifestyle now that's teaching 6 days a week, various subjects in various locations throughout Tokyo. Not throughout, but I mean 3 or 4 places I'm traveling to weekly. Sometimes 2 locations in the same day. It's totally fine by me. I like moving around. I'm nomadic, and that's fine by me. I enjoy it. And then coming home at night and generally working on something. Could be a translation, could be video editing, could be compiling older material into new formats. Just today, I completed 2 small projects, I suppose you could say. Small in the sense that they didn't take an inordinate amount of time because I was using pre-existing materials from the past. And so one of these small projects, which I started this morning when I left the apartment and got on the train, was compiling some older material into a new form, and that became a new kind of hour-and-a-half long compilation album, you could say. And I worked on creating some cover art for this as well. I'll show it on the screen in just a moment. And then the title is The Things We Once Believed, 16 tracks. And then later in the day, I moved from one school to another. I ate lunch, I had a conversation with someone. I don't talk to people that often these days, apart from my students. And then I worked on a translation of something that is at one and the same time a short story that I had written back in 2012, the year after I started at Kyushu University in Fukuoka, and a good year or more before my first band in Fukuoka. Called The Dead Detective. And I translated the entire thing, and the intention behind that is because I wanted to put it, subtitle the version of this, which is spoken word with the kind of musical backing, The Dead Detective, and to put it in both English and Japanese. And recently I released my documentary Evolution, and for that, for the first time, really, I attempted to translate my own lyrics from English into Japanese. In many cases, it's just fragments of songs. But I thought, if I'm going to translate everything that I'm saying in English for a Japanese audience, that I should therefore also translate the lyrics, because people for years coming to my shows, or friends listening to my recordings, they've asked me, what I'm singing about, or if it's spoken word, what I'm talking about, or whatever. And I think that without an understanding of the lyrics, one is missing a fairly important part of the experience of the music. Not really in terms of the music itself, but certainly in terms of the message. And I also for many years wrote short stories, novellas. I wrote one novel, which it's almost like this very long stream of consciousness thing that I never published, and actually I don't think I would publish it, even if I had the opportunity at this point. I don't know. I'd have to reread it. It's from a past life, almost literally. But I have many short stories that I published over the years, and almost, well, 99.9% of them are in English. Just like the bulk of my music is sung, things that have lyrics are sung in English, most of them. I have written some original songs in Japanese, with Japanese lyrics, Nami no Sekai, and a song that was called Live for Today, which I've retitled Kyo no Tameni, and I put it on this compilation today, and also some others. And then I covered Ura's Kanashimi Johnny, Sad Johnny, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I think it's important for my listeners to, especially now that I'm not concentrating so much on live performances right now anyway. At the moment, I'm not doing shows. So my recordings, my video, I want to concentrate on these things. And so I'm planning, now that I've done this Dead Detective, which is both a story and a spoken word piece with music, which is why it's the perfect bridge between the two sides, which is to say my fiction writing, or my writing, basically fiction, and my music. And of course I've been subtitling. I did Evolution, and I'm subtitling my talks, right, some of them. So the more I've done this, and also now I'm teaching Japanese to English translation, both I and my students have gone the next level, because I was using Easy Web, NHK Easy Web articles in Japanese. The Japanese is simplified, which means then the English would be simpler. And we've moved on from those because some of the Japanese is strange. Both I and students kept getting caught on some of those unnatural phrases, because they're made for learners of Japanese. And now we're doing the regular NHK articles. And so when I was in graduate school at University of Colorado, Boulder, I was doing translations of, at first actually I was doing Buddhism, so firstly Japanese texts, literary texts that had Buddhist themes, for example. I was doing koten, right, this classical Japanese, and then, so, you know, I spent 2 years or something in classes translating classical Japanese. I did a Kanbun class for Buddhism, which is taking what was a Chinese text that was a transliteration from Sanskrit, you know, and then putting it into Japanese readings, and that was really difficult, and I didn't stick with that, actually. And then eventually I didn't stick with the, I wouldn't say didn't stick with it, but I did my thesis on Abe Kobo, who is a more contemporary or modern contemporary. He died in 1993. And so I was translating interviews and things. And this is years ago. And so now again, I'm doing more and more translation, primarily for myself. But also, as I said, I'm teaching now one class. I'm doing news articles and translating my talks. And now, from the end of this year now, especially lyrics, my own lyrics. And then now short stories that I'm thinking maybe I'll go back and translate some of those. I'm not sure what I'll do with them yet, right? The lyrics, that, yes. And that's what I want to talk about a bit now, because one of the things I'm now planning on doing is that my next kind of series of video stuff. I just completed Evolution, right? And that took me a long time to finish, because not only the editing of the video itself, which took some time, obviously, with the video, you know, clips and visuals and things, but also the subtitles in Japanese. It took me a long time and a relatively long time, I should say, and I'm working 6 days a week, so it's not like I can sit at home and work on it from morning till night every day, or I don't even have a 2-day weekend to do it. I have a 1-day weekend, and I have to do other things like cleaning this apartment, buying groceries, and grading for my classes. That's part of my job too, but I have to do that on my own time, right? So anyway, my next series of videos then, what I've decided to do is I've been rediscovering my own older material. And when I say older, you know, like people think, oh, you mean like 10 years ago, 15 years ago? No, I mean like 2.5, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. The earliest materials from 2018, 1921 to, it's like 4.5 years, something like that. It's going to be 2023 soon, depending how you, right, add that up. But not, you know, all earlier means, you know, a couple of years ago or a few years ago, kind of earlier. But actually, you know, things have changed drastically since then. Obviously in the world, with Corona firstly. Not even talking about the political things that I kind of focused a lot on in the evolution video. And actually, I want to sort of not distance myself from those things. I mean, they're happening around us. Right? The A4 paper in China now, right? Protests, and Ukraine is almost completely blacked out, etc. But not this, but I'm going back to pre-COVID music of my own. Pre-COVID, pre-Ukraine war. And all this stuff. And I was in a different place, not only mentally, but also physically. I was in Fukuoka, Japan. I was living alone, as I am now, except that I had a steady partner that I used to meet, and also I was much more social. I used to go out, I would say, almost every day or night, you know, when I wasn't working, I mean, but I would go to restaurants, bars, eating, drinking, playing a lot of live shows, sometimes casually, just, you know, doing sessions with people, or also doing shows, like booking shows. I was collaborating with Sunny Yasuda, and that's actually one thing I want to revisit, are the albums we did. That's kind of complicated to talk about because he and I began collaborating together in Fukuoka. We did some live things together, only a couple times really, and they were all different. The first was a all covers thing. I was just singing, and he was playing classical guitar. And then we decided to do other things. We did an improv show with my backing, 2 long pieces, the head or the tail, which is a 20-minute piece, and Anger. And both of those for me was like the first time I did completely, or most, not completely, but almost all improv. I was improvising the piano. The vocals were set to the backing, and then halfway through that piece it just goes kind of improv. I was playing the drums and so. But we did in really what ended up being, I guess, 2020, after I had come to Tokyo, via, you know, computer exchange, and into the COVID days of 2020, completed some 2 really interesting albums. I want to do a talk on these, and not just to talk, but share the music. And I want to translate, excuse me, lyrics for these, and put those English and Japanese on the screen. And not just Mark and Sunny, I'm just mentioning how different times were. I did the project with Joe, This Dark Shroud. I also made recently a compilation of music from that period, and there's some really strong material. The studio stuff that really, you know, there are live videos on YouTube from we did a number of shows together, but the studio sounding, you know, the studio stuff we did in Logic, we recorded at my place, you know, basically most of those tracks I had already recorded for my solo stuff, and Joe would come and add bass or guitar bass, what he called guitar bass, and where we sort of work on arrangements together. All of those, you know, even with the pre-existing backing, I would add vocals, or I would change arrangements, or add keyboard, piano, something, remix it, rearrange it, and it would become ours, you know. And there's some really strong material, and also he brought some material to the table from the very beginning, like the song Prism that he sings on, and I do backing. Now That It's Over was his guitar riff and bass riff, and a number of other pieces like this. Leave It All Behind, which I love, and there are different versions of that. There's a remix version I did that's more mine in a way with the electronics and stuff, but the original version we did together, which I improv the vocals over his bluesy bass and guitar bass line, but that's like mainly, you know, just his playing and my vocals, this kind of thing. Apart from these two collaborative projects, though, I probably recorded more material in such a short span of time than I ever had before or after. I mean, that sounds strange, because since coming to Tokyo in 2019 and the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic hit full force, and up to a point, I was still kind of making things at that pace. I just, like, every day, almost every day, I just plug in my USB keyboard and I just start playing around and making new stuff, you know. And that became somewhat improvisatory. I mean, you know, you could say that everything I've ever written has been improvisatory in a sense. I mean, there have been things I've written the lyrics down first, you know, A, B, chorus, the earlier material, Black Nail, that kind of thing. Black Nail, actually, though, was a kind of improv thing, too, because I had written the lyrics for something else, and then that was my first electronic experiment. I was in GarageBand. This before I even started using Logic, and I had been only recording stuff on the acoustic, and then it was all presets, and I just figured out how to get presets to do like a synth-sounding thing that had a kind of rhythm, and then I added drum beats, and I sang improv over the top of it. That became the first version of Black Nail, which I rearranged it and re-recorded it with, once after I got my keyboard in Logic and redid everything, the vocals. The da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that was after. That was the original version, didn't even have that. That was after, but, you know, it was created via improv. So anyway, my point is, from at least Black Nail onward, and the non-guitar songs, right, those, you know, that had set sort of chords in the beginning, like Want or Gone or these kinds of songs, right? You know, particularly post that, once I got the keyboard, especially, you know, I did A-B chorus songs much more than I do now, and actually it's that set of material, as well as some of the more, I guess, experimental, improvisatory, longer pieces I started doing, and instrumentals and noise pieces and ambient pieces and things that some people have described as being sort of soundtrackish. Those came a little later, and then I was kind of working in both, and I sort of put my guitar down for most of 2018 and 2019. I only used it very sparingly, and it wasn't really until 2021 that I started doing stuff with the guitar again, and then it really became, from this year, as I talked about in the last talk, more improvisatory. But let me go back, because the material I've been revisiting is this stuff from Fukuoka days up through early to mid 2020, I guess you could say. In 2020, I guess you could say post-March or April, or maybe up through May or so. I don't remember exactly, but I think in May, late May, I left my home, my new home in Tokyo. I'd been living there only for around half a year. I came to Tokyo in late October of 2019. The pandemic hit and started getting messy in March, right? In Japan anyway, when we had our first state of emergency was in March, and I had my last live show for 6 months on March 15th. I talked about that on the live thing, video, excursions video. And then I was at home making music, and I made my first documentary at home during that time, still living with my ex-partner. And that was the musical journey with the subtitles on it in English and Japanese. That was also, maybe you could say, my first attempt at a narrative, bilingual narrative. I didn't even speak on that because I was doing it late at night and stuff, and so I didn't have to use my voice. I could just subtitling on the computer with headphones through the night with my partner sleeping. Didn't bother anyone, right? But this year, right, and last summer, I started doing the talk series during my semi-lockdown, during the Delta wave and the Olympics in Tokyo. Anyway, I go back, going on a tangent here, off on a tangent. So, I guess it was May or late May of 2020, I left, as I said, where I was living, and I was actually, I lived in a almost like a rented hotel room. It was furnished, and all the electric and everything was included, and you could rent it on a monthly basis, maybe even a weekly basis. I think it was monthly, anyway, in my case. And eventually I found this place, and I moved in here at the very beginning of July of 2020. In the interim, there was one album I did, Untitled, in 2020. I started recording that in that rental space. I was sleeping all day and miserable, and COVID was new and scary. And Untitled, so the material that I've been revisiting is everything, I guess you could say, up through around that time, so until about Untitled in mid-2020. Actually, a couple releases I did after it that I'm thinking I might include in the series with subtitle, lyrics and so on, and these kind of introductory talks as well. And that's, there are two. There's Signs, which actually is a combination of two short albums, basically, I made living here during the pandemic in late 2020. And then the final release I put out that year is called Endnote, and that's actually earlier material from my sort of period I was interested in so-called noise music. What I was doing was taking earlier material, even A-B chorus kind of songs, and rearranging, remixing, and adding sort of noise elements to them. And I call that Endnote. So I might include Endnote, and I might include Signs, and I definitely want to do Untitled, and then everything prior to that. That's the past life. Well, it's all the past life. 2020 was, because from 2021 I was here late 2020, but 2021 you know, that's another story. That's the tetralogy, and that's another thing. So the Fukuoka material between 2018, really, it reaches back to 2017. Some of those compositions certainly do. Even 2016, if you want to go get technical about. Black Nail was, the original version was 2016. I re-recorded it in 2017, and then, you know, did newer arrangements through 2018, 2019 even, and last year even I did the new version with different chords in it and stuff. So, but essentially I'm going back to material from the Fukuoka days, including, as I say, some of the stuff I recorded 2019 and 2020 in Tokyo. And that's really like what Reincarnations was about, the double album. They're both very long too, and those are under compilations on Apple Music and Spotify. And unfortunately on Spotify, compilations don't come up under albums, they come up separately. And Apple, it's a little easier to see if you scroll down, but I've noticed that it might be harder to find on Spotify if it's under compilation. But anyway, it's there. And I mean, that project in and of itself took me a while to complete and compile, even though I didn't remix most of those. But what I found is, like, it was like after I whittled that thing down, and then I also did Past Life because I had more things, and then I, you know, played with some of those, and then I talked about in Evolution the other older pieces that I totally redid and put on The World Was Not the Same in 1123. 1123, some of those aren't even that different in terms of their arrangements or mixes. They're just slightly tweaked. But now again, like today, I put together another compilation of things that just either are out of circulation or the things that were they're on albums that the part of the pre-2020 back catalog. Some of them were released in 2020 because I didn't get onto the streaming services really full blast until 2019, and I had all this stuff to release. So some of the things recorded in 2018 and so on, 2019 were released like in 2020. But even after doing all of these compilations this year, and as I say, the 1123 and The World Was Not the Same, which also includes, both of them actually include newer material as well, right? Re-recorded songs, me playing guitar on 1123, well, on both. All of this stuff, there's still not only more other material that I haven't released or that's sort of out of print, but I realized that there's a lot of material from my back catalog, that even stuff that is currently in circulation that's been published, and if you scroll down, my LPs list on Apple Music or Spotify, I think some of these things just, do they exist? They exist, they're there. Even I've forgotten about them, if that makes sense. Or I had forgotten about them. So I recently, actually thanks to Spotify, they have a playlist called This Is Marc Lowe, and I think it's AI generated, and it changes. Like the tracks that are on there, the order, and even the tracks themselves, they shuffle around. And so I recently opened it and I was like, I was cleaning my apartment. It was a Sunday. It was my one day off, and I had a million things I wanted to do, errands around the house, as it were. And so I just played it in the background. It's 6+ hours, 50 tracks. I just let it run, and it was running from like late morning until early evening or something. And I was literally just constantly, you know, cleaning laundry, dishes, decorating the room. I redecorated the walls and doing all kinds of things here, and cooking and stuff. And some of those tracks, I was like, whoa, ooh, I had forgotten about this, or I haven't heard this in so long, or this isn't bad, I kind of like this. Its style's completely different, and it started bringing back, of course, memories of things. of that past life in Fukuoka. I had started talking about earlier, living alone but having a partner, being social, but also just like making the music literally, if not daily, then weekly or many times a week, where I would, there was a period for a stretch of months during 2018 and during 2019, I think mostly those 2 years, where like if I wasn't recording something new daily, I was playing with something that I had already recorded, or I was, adding bits to it and rearranging or remixing or doing something. And I just kept having more and more material and sort of albums upon albums, more than I knew what to do with in a way. And sort of that stuff still exists, and it's not disposable. I mean, it's not all of it obviously is gold or even silver per se, but it's, they're not like, I don't think of them as demos. They're not throwaways. They're some of the things I don't feel the burning need to release at this time or share at this time or do anything with. It's okay, but I'm gonna light a candle. I've been lighting candles in my room. It's for myself, I'm alone in this apartment, and I like doing these things for myself. Why not? But it's like this, so but there's some good material, and I really wanted to revisit it myself. This is an opportunity for me to revisit it, but not only to revisit it, obviously I can just listen to it anytime and okay, I've heard it now and I'm gonna move on, but some of it, not all of it, not every single thing, but some individual pieces, but also some albums or works have this. Detective, for example, Dark River Chronicles is a concept album, so this one is going to be the first one that I do. I already started working on it. I have given a 10-minute talk, giving some background, and I've already actually subtitled that in Japanese. And then I did the Dead Detective piece today, which, because that relates, actually, it was the impetus for the project before I started the project. So that's why I ended up doing that. And then I listened to the Sunny stuff, Mark Sunny stuff, and really, there's some really strong material there. As I said, I did the Dark Shroud stuff, but then there's Requiem, which I recorded. I was working on it. Actually, it wasn't going to be Requiem. It was just like whatever. I was working on new material that became Requiem when my good friend Usagi, that's her nickname, Muto Watanabe, she was a very nice, very sensitive girl and had depression, and she committed suicide. And my bassist, collaborator, friend, and I was working on the album, and I had one recording that she made in my room while we were all together, including my bassist and another friend, Jinnai, who actually is on Detective 2, as well as Joe Shotaro. She recorded something in my room, which was her, I think it was her parting message, but she says, I'm weak, others are strong. I want to go, but I don't want to hurt anyone, so I'm not going to do that. But then she did it, and that made it, well, unfortunately you could say, but at the same time, fortunately, the recording was lucky enough to have that, and I guess that's the last, I think, time she recorded her voice like that for anyone. It was her message to us, and that I made around the piece Requiem, for example. And that album, I think, is very strong, and it's obviously strongly themed as Requiem, so themes of death and Bodhidharma and the Frog. There's a new mix I had been working on of that at the time. I put on there a new version of Chaos I had been working on, which I used bits of her sample in there. And then later, Joe had given me he had sent me a file of her singing. I guess she was working on a song or something, original, singing in Japanese, a cappella. And he said, can you do something with this? I tried to arrange a bass part or a guitar part music around it, and it was just, I couldn't quite do it, and I need your help. Could you do something with it? So I said, let me give it a listen, and he sent me the MP3 or whatever it was. Quality wasn't very good. I put it in Logic, and I worked with it and put some effectors on it and whatever. And then I worked around it with the synth and keyboard, and the original version had some drums and stuff, and then the version that I put on Requiem was actually the second mix I did, which is more ethereal sounding. And I added my voice, kind of the theme about trying to get herself out of bed in the morning kind of thing. And so in English, I had the one phrase about getting out of bed. But then after that, it's just literally the recording of her with my sort of ethereal backing. So Detective, the concept album, which was recorded in 2018, is a Requiem from late 2019. I think I finished it either at the end of the year or early 2020. She died in November, mid-November. I think it was the 14th, 2019. So those two albums, definitely. And I mentioned Untitled, I'll talk about. This is my first Corona album, and kind of already mentioned the circumstances a bit there. And other stuff prior and between the Sunny stuff and the... So, Digital Errors, that was actually 2018. They're out of order, actually. The way they're published is not the order in which they were created. Digital Errors was created as an album, Digital Errors, and the version that's up now, it says Definitive Edition, and it has all of these remixes. It's like, it's got more or less the original album and then remixes I had done. There were so many. I basically remixed every song or almost every song on the album, so I just made, like, if it would be a double CD kind of thing, that the first would be the album and the second would be the remixes. That was the concept. I don't think anyone's listening to all those mixes. It's okay, and I'm considering maybe reintroducing that in the YouTube version as just the album, and maybe one or two of the mixes that are, really strong or have some special meaning or something I want to say about for whatever reason. But Digital Errors, I want to talk about that. That's another album that I think is quite strong. That was my homage to industrial music like Skinny Puppy and 9 Inch Nails from the 90s and 80s and 90s, that I did in my way, and all original songs. And some other things. And some of the stuff that, like Mercurial Moon, for example, that album, I thought I would do a talk on it, and I listened to it again last night, and I thought this has got some really strong material on it, and it's got some material I'd like to either redo or reorder it, do something different with it. Some of the songs I currently didn't like as much as I had before. It's all perspective, and it's where you're at any time, right? Because I might listen to it again in 6 months and like something that right now I don't like so much, and vice versa. But so the compilation I did today, some of that material went on there. There's static lines, which had been the new noise. Became static lines, and so there's a couple pieces I used on there I put on today's compilation. And then some unpublished things. There was an LP called A Malfunctioning that I took down, but there are at least 2 tracks on there I really liked, Ether and Fractured. It's called Refractured because it was a remix, but I'm going to put it up as Fractured. And some of these experimental pieces. There's Only 3, which is a song that I played live many times and have done various versions of, and the sort of, in Japanese we call teibon, the version solo version that I most often, use the backing for live and stuff, is on Mercurial Moon, and I think it's just no one's listening to it. Another one is Running, which is ended up on an LP I created called Ghost, which is mostly sort of noise pieces and whatever, and I actually took some other pieces from that, put it on the compilation, and also Running is with Sonny's guitar on it. And the remixed version of that is on our album, but the original version kind of got lost in the shuffle. So what I'm doing now is, you know, I'm just, again, I'm considering reorganizing, in some cases remixing or rearranging things for, you could say for posterity, I suppose. I mean, you know, I think about that. None of us knows, you know, how long we're going to be here. So the material exists while I'm willing and able and motivated to do it. I want to get everything organized well and in the best possible, you know, format. And in some cases I might remix or rearrange, but not all of it. Some of it's just going to be as it is, and it's perfect as it is. Some of it I don't want to mess with, even if it's imperfect, because it has some thing to it that, you know, that I couldn't recreate now, because it was, I could only have made it that way at that time and in that headspace and in that place, not only mentally and physically, but also that period of time in my life and in the world, pre-COVID, for example, you know. So, but now that I've got the skill, going back to this, to really, I think my skills are getting better. I'm not perfect. I'm not a professional translator by profession, but, you know, I'm teaching a class, and I've been, you know, doing these subtitles and things. So now it's the time to translate the lyrics. So people, you know, people who have been listening, friends from Fukuoka, for example, listening to my recordings, or who had seen me live over the years, that some of that older material, they never, maybe some of my friends, Japanese friends who don't really speak or read English much. Most Japanese people can understand some, but, you know, they didn't know what I was singing about. Now they'll have an opportunity to hopefully have a better grasp on what that was and what that is. And the current material, eventually I might do the same with, but I have to start somewhere, and I want to reintroduce some of these albums that I feel have been, again, sort of lost, neglected, in part by me, neglected. You know, I put them out 2019, 2020, I just put all this stuff out because I got a distribution setup that was working for me. And then this year, 2022, I'm on another distributor that is allowing me to do other things that I couldn't do and release other things I couldn't release before. So that's good. But so now, you know, it takes time, obviously, and energy and motivation, which I have now to do these. And I think rather than just, you know, I mean, they're on Apple, they're on Spotify, I've got the distribution part, but YouTube is a great tool to make them into these, you know, I can do the talk, introduction, and then I'm animating the covers slightly so that they have some movement, and then I'll put the lyrics in both English and Japanese. So you have the, you have all, right? It's basically the focus is on the audio, but at the same time, the visual of the cover art, right? People don't buy CDs, people who buy vinyl, often it's because they want the art, right? And they want the large size art. Well, you know, I can share the art and I can animate it and update it in a sense. And also the lyrics in real time are there, and that's the advantage of this technology, right? The video and YouTube and my having access to the software to subtitle and do animation and stuff, right? So yeah, I can make music videos, and yeah, I can do these you know, just talk videos, but also I want to utilize the technology in that way. I mean, there are lots of, right, albums on YouTube that just, it's the cover and the music and that's it, and that's fine. But, you know, I can put a talk on, give the background, not only show the lyrics in English, but also once I've translated them, I can also share them in Japanese. So this is my next project. And I'll do the albums one by one. I'm not going to do everything. No way, too much, actually. And I keep, as I say, releasing or considering, you know, other material. And this new compilation, The Things We Once Believed, also new today, right? It's earlier material. I also want to share this somehow, perhaps on YouTube, perhaps eventually I'll release it via Apple and so on. But so these are my projects, and I've announced the Kether to Malkuth in January 23rd, 2023. January 23rd is the date that Station to Station was released in 1976. And Kether to Malkuth, for those of you who are Bowie fans, you might know, you know, a lyric from Station to Station. And the stations of Station to Station are not physical stations, although, you know, this song's got the sound of the train on the tracks, but in fact, the double meaning is the Jewish mystical Kabbalah, right, that Bowie was interested in at the time. He was interested in Aleister Crowley, and Sure White Stains is a Crowley reference, right? And then Kether to Malkuth is the reference to the Kabbalah and the stations, the kind of metaphysical stations that one travels through. And so I just realized that Station to Station was released January 23rd and 012323 next year. I thought I would do some sort of tribute. At the least, I'll do my interpretation of that song, but also I'm planning to do some other Bowie stuff. I mean, it's covers, but actually in my own style, as I always do, but I think this time they may be even more radically, I may even more radically derail the arrangements, if that's possible, of the originals than I've done in the past. I mean, my Black Star from 2018, 2019, those, right, the arrangement's very different. And other pieces I've done, I tend to radically rearrange them Sunday and almost everything, but this is going to be something new as well. Again, it'll be Bowie-tribute, but it'll be on the theme of Kether to Malkuth. And so that's another project, and I want to have that finished and ready to go, you know, by early January, say, so that I can get it up and out properly through the proper channels by the 23rd of January. In the worst case scenario, so to speak, I would release it on January 23rd on YouTube only, and then like have it released in February or something, or on Bandcamp and YouTube, whatever. It'll be out in some form on the 23rd of January, I think, and the videos and the reintroduction of the older albums with translations. This is what keeps me going. And as I say, I'm teaching 6 days a week, and I love teaching. And then my life is teaching and doing this stuff. So there you have it. Thank you. Stay warm and safe and healthy if you can. And if you're with your loved ones, treat them well and treat yourself well. That's really important. Thanks. Signing off. Marc Lowe, Tokyo, Japan.